Farmland and Farmers for the Future is a project of Equity Trust, a nonprofit promoting practical applications of equity principles. If we're serious about agricultural preservation, it's not enough to protect the land alone. We have to make sure that it remains available and affordable to farmers and ranchers, and they face competition, not only from developers, but from the rural estate market as well. We invite you to consider how the examples presented here take further steps to keep our working landscapes working. Land conservation in the United States began more than 100 years ago, but the last 25 years have seen extraordinary growth in the number of land trusts, their sophistication and skills, and the number of acres they've protected. The vision of the conservation movement has also expanded from its original focus on wild lands to encompass working lands as well. Over 1 million acres of farmland are lost each year, prompting many states, counties, and land trusts to establish agricultural land protection initiatives. This has strengthened and diversified the constituency for conservation, opening new sources of public and private support. But with new opportunities have come new challenges. Subdivision and development are not the only land use and market trends threatening agriculture. An emerging market for second homes and weekend estates in rural settings often prices agricultural land out of the reach of farmers. And conventional conservation tools alone may not be sufficient to keep farmland affordable to farmers.
When conservation easements as a means of protecting farmland were first being talked about 20 and 25 years ago, I'm not sure that anyone envisioned that there might someday be a difference between protecting farmland and protecting farmland as farmland.
The idea behind a conservation easement is that what it does is strip away potential development and subdivision value, leaving only the undeveloped value. In most cases, that's the agricultural value. However, we've seen over time that there's a new value that's being added to this agricultural value, and that's a value that's a result of a new breed of buyers, people who are buying land for purposes of a rural landscape, of the rural way of life. And what it's doing is adding this additional layer of value to the agricultural land, making it that much more difficult for the agricultural land user to purchase the land at a price that reflects its agricultural carrying capacity.
This issue of affordability is not an issue if you're just concerned about protecting land for open space. That if the only reason you're doing this work is to protect it so it won't have houses on it and will remain open. Because if that's the situation, you probably don't care too much about who owns it, how much they're paying for it. The land's open. But it becomes a very critical issue if you're talking about working landscapes and making sure that the people who are working those landscapes have access to that land and are able to afford to purchase that land.
Farmers and ranchers in many parts of California are feeling these pressures as land values continue to rise above the level at which production agriculture is viable. And the Sierra Valley, north of Lake Tahoe, is no exception.
Sierra Valley is a large ranching valley that consists of about 125,000 acres. And it's still very much in a rural characteristic and working landscape, as we like to call it, both cattle ranching and hay farming primarily. I think the really interesting thing about the Sierra Valley is that we're only approximately 20 miles as a crow flies, or 25 miles from the town of Reno, which is an extremely rapidly expanding urban area. We're also less than 2 hours away from Sacramento. The urbanization pressures in this area are very significant.
We're in the midst of negotiating an easement on 2 contiguous ranches, which total about 22,000 acres. What this will do, of course, is prevent unlimited subdivision and development, allowing that land hopefully to be used for agricultural purposes into the future. However, we realize that the real estate market has a life of its own. And even with conservation easements on land, we're seeing the value of some of these lands rise far above what one would expect as a result of having stripped away the development rights. This is the Rocking O Ranch. It's currently up for sale, and the asking price has been about $3.5 million. It clearly is not a price that reflects the agricultural carrying capacity on this ranch. So they're looking for the potential wealthy buyer who could buy the land, maybe run cattle, maybe not, but would be paying that price with the scenery in mind primarily. In today's economy, it's hard enough for farmers and ranchers to hold on to the land that they have. But if what we want to do is provide every opportunity for future agricultural operators, we really do have to think in terms of this issue of affordability. First-time buyers, as farmers and ranchers, could never begin to compete with the other market of buyers out there.
The fact that land is simply not built upon does not mean that agriculture is necessarily going to survive. There's significant social aspects of agriculture to keep an agricultural community viable.
We have to think in terms of collecting a whole new series of tools, a new toolbox, so to speak, for preventing these lands to be lost to rising real estate values and ensuring that they're available to farmers and ranchers.
In Marin County, the combination of natural beauty and proximity to an urban population has created an ever-increasing demand for rural land, land that has long been used by ranchers and dairy farmers.
Our goal is to try and permanently preserve agricultural land for agricultural use. About a third of the county is still in productive agricultural use. About a third of the county is publicly owned in state and national parks and watershed lands. And the other third is urbanized. And because we are so close to the metropolitan Bay Area and its 7 million population, there's enormous pressure both for development and simply on land prices. The market for large agricultural properties is largely people of wealth who are looking for a second home or for a hobby farm or ranch or for a rural estate. And that is the principal concern we have at the moment, is that when land comes on the market, who's going to buy it and what long-term effect does that have on agriculture in this area? Up until recently, simply the ability to purchase conservation easements has been our principal tool, our core program. With the recent jump in land prices, however, we are now faced with the problem that even when land comes on the market, the value of a conservation easement may not be great enough to reduce the cost to the point where an agricultural operator is willing to buy it or is able to justify buying it. So we are beginning to look at other strategies that might be used either in conjunction with or in place of a conservation easement. We may want to hold other property rights that would further reduce the value of the property and assure its affordability not only for a present buyer but perhaps for the next buyer of that same property.
A similar trend in the market for rural property is emerging across the country in Vermont.
One of our principal accomplishments has simply been the amount of land we've managed to conserve over the last 23 years. Currently it's around 365,000 acres of land, which is roughly 7% of the privately owned open space lands in Vermont. The other major accomplishment, I think, has been to look at land conservation in the context of community and considering other societal needs and community goals such as affordable housing and economic development. And I think it's going to be even more important going down the road. There has been a saying that Vermont without its farms would still be a lovely place, but it wouldn't be Vermont. And I think there's some truth to that. It is a community that is still connected to its working lands, both farmland and forest land. We're experiencing pressure from the estate market in certain parts of Vermont, but not generally in the important agricultural areas. But it's coming. I think the issue of farm affordability is one that is of great interest to us, and that if we could find a mechanism that seemed to work well and was accepted by the farm community and was cost effective, that we would use it. I think the struggle has been to figure out what that mechanism is.
There's a huge range in attention to this issue among the land trusts in the country. Among those land trusts that work with agricultural landowners, there are some that are very focused on this issue and are very, very concerned that they not only protect the resource, but also protect it in such a way that this land will be affordable for production agriculture. 20 years ago, this was not an issue that was on AFT's radar screen. Now, There are some parts of the country where AFT staff working with local land trusts and local farmland protection programs are distributing bumper stickers that say it's not farmland without farmers. Our job may only be half done if we've just protected the resource. We need to at least address the issue of, well, who's going to be using it, and are we protecting land for purposes of continuing productive agriculture? I think it's particularly important with the public program, where legislatures and county commissioners may have thought that they were investing in keeping farmers on farmland. And 3 years later, if they discover that land that was protected with the purchase conservation easement funded by taxpayer dollars has just been sold for $1 million as a site for a trophy home, then that's going to cause real political problems for the ongoing support of that farmland protection program. So I think there's a recognition that in saving farmland, it's not just saving farmland, it's saving water supply, it's saving wildlife habitat, it's saving way of life, it's saving a quality of life, it's saving nearby land that can be available for recreational uses. It's clear that urban and suburban populations understand that there's all these other benefits to saving farmland.
Throughout the country, farmers involved in many kinds of agriculture are grappling with these challenges. 3 small-scale vegetable farmers engaged in community-supported agriculture are finding solutions. The farmers, together with local land trusts and sometimes public agencies, are exploring options for effective and lasting agricultural protection. They are utilizing a variety of tools and tenure models and are achieving success and setting examples that should be helpful to many others.